Hello, everyone. Eric here, Kim here. It's Moon Knight Wednesdays. It's whatever Disney Plus has given us Wednesdays, I know. But right now it's Moon Knight Wednesdays. And we are going to talk full spoilers about the second episode of Moon Knight, which was called Summon the Suit. So if you haven't seen it, we are about to spoil the entire thing for you. You've been warned. Go watch it and come back if you haven't seen it, or you don't care and you just want to listen. So let's go. 3, 2, 1. Full spoilers. Yes, episode was called Summon the Suit. It was directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. This was their first work with Marvel Studios, but it shall not be their last. They directed one other episode of Moon Knight, but then they're going to be the main directors on Loki season 2 coming up. They're going to do the majority of that. And it was written by Michael Castellian, who did the second episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier he wrote. So he's like the episode 2 guy. You get him in here for MCU. Kim, what did you think of the second episode of Moon Knight?
Less pressure if you're episode 2 guy, surely.
Sure.
I really liked this episode. I love this series so far. You mentioned Benson and Moorhead, and you can really, if you know their work, you can see their stamp on this. And it's not so far removed from the last episode, which was Mohammed Diab, who directs most of the series. They definitely got continuity with his style, but they put their own stamp on it. They brought some of their horror leanings to it, and they're au fait with the timey-wimey stuff. If you know the Endless and Resolution and Synchronic, yes. And I thought what they did was great with this. But like in terms of moving the story along, we see some of what Moon Knight is capable of in this episode, which was cool. And Stephen getting a taste of his own Mr. Knight powers.
Mr. Knight, I always like to say that like Mr. F on Arrested Development. Sorry.
In his white Colonel Sanders suit.
Yes.
With some cool sequences, and we learned something about Harrow's past, it was cool to learn a bit more. There was more of Oscar Isaac's amazing British accent, and some of those phrases I can't stop. Sorry for anyone who is in close contact with me because I keep saying these phrases over and over. But yeah, above all, from the last episode and this episode, the quality of the filmmaking is really selling it to me. I love the symbolism, which we'll talk about more as we go through. And just the attention to detail is great.
I'm really digging this as well. I think I'm curious for people how big of a stumbling block at all is the fact that it's so disconnected from the MCU at large. It's even with the title Summon the Suit, I'm like, another Marvel project might have him be like, because he's so confused when she's saying that, be like, what do you mean, like Iron Man? But he doesn't say that. They don't do that sort of thing here a lot, but I really like the tone and the direction. I agree with you. This makes me very feel like that Loki season 2 is in good hands, because this is a different vibe than Loki, but there's still enough of a crossover there that I think will work well. We can talk about the sequence more later, but the moment that really grabbed me on a directorial level on this episode was when he is running in the storage locker. And as you mentioned, there's certainly a horror element to that with the lights coming, and it's very intense, and Khonshu's looking very scary. But then he has that freeze frame when he screams. They freeze frame on it.
Yes.
And it's very funny and very artistically different than like MCU has done. And I appreciated that. I thought that was really, there you go. Look at this.
It was great. And that kind of, those lights coming on isn't unusual. We've seen that before in plenty of things down long, in libraries or storage places, whatever. But it works. They've done it really well. It works really well. It's really tense. That freeze frame moment was also a highlight for me, Eric.
Yes. William, thank you for bringing that moment up. That was great. But let's talk about, the show is called Moon Knight. And I could understand if some people do want a little more Moon Knight in their Moon Knight. It's two episodes, and we got the glimpse of him at the end of episode 1. And I don't think that's too surprising as far as the rhythm of these things go, that only we get that glimpse. I did think it was funny here that because it's such a big deal, the episode is called Summon the Suit. He doesn't understand what that even means. When he does it quote unquote wrong, and it's Mr. Knight. I did think that was funny on a show level because Moon Knight, full cape cloak Moon Knight, we've seen so little of that it is funny that when he does materialize here, it's the wrong version.
Yeah.
But I think it works because of the way the show is working with Steven just doesn't know what the hell is going on. So it's going to happen wrong. Do you think, would you like to see more of a full Moon Knight in action, or do you like the way we're kind of working up to it more and more?
I do like working up to it. I like a slow burn. It's cool. And we are with Steven. They've made the decision to have him as our point of identification, and we're seeing things through his kind of layman's eyes, and we'll learn more about Mark's backstory, I'm sure, as we go through, and we'll get more Moon Knight action, and it will have earned it, I think, by the time we see some more Moon Knight action. But we did get some cool stuff in this episode. Here he is, Steven looking at Mark reflected in the bus, which, by the way, was the number 25 to Tottenham Court Road.
There you go.
Yeah, it's an American Werewolf reference, surely. And there are Werewolf by Night, which we know is coming up, and those comics inspired this series as well. So that was an aside. Yes, the rooftop chase that came after this, when Mark finally took over, or Steven allowed Mark to take over his body, and we saw Moon Knight in action. And he ends up killing the jackal, was really cool. We saw him use his crescent dart. He got him in the back of the neck, and then he speared him on this spire, which was classic horror. Great shot, looking up, and everything kind of pointed up at the moon, which was really cool. Here we go. Great framing of the moon there. And I loved all the crescent imagery throughout this bit, and throughout the episode, where looking down below this spire here, there's a circle and you only see part of it, and the chairs are arranged in a crescent around that circle, and it was just all kind of, like I said, the attention to detail was great in this episode.
Yeah, I'm okay with the slow build too. I mean, I think they eventually have to kind of give us a lot of Moon Knight fighting. But right now, first of all, I'm just engaged by what's happening with the Steven and Mark of it all, and Oscar Isaac's performance. But also, when we got it was a lot of fun. First of all, Mr. Knight just looks cool, right? So even though it was funny that it was like after our little glimpse of Moon Knight last week, we get this sort of big Mr. Knight moment here. Before we get a full Moon Knight fight sequence, I still enjoyed it as far as what the hell is going on, if at all. Doesn't Mark even say to him, what is that? What are you wearing? Mark says, hopefully this doesn't get us flagged. He says, I don't know how any of this shit works, man. He's just, Steven's just trying to figure it all out too.
Pulled out his poles.
That's right. And I agree with you. All those visuals were really cool. It's funny, serendipity. I don't think either ripped off the other. They were being made at the same time. But it's funny that the Batman and now Moon Knight both have the removable logo weapon. So I think that was just two different costume designers saying, hey, it'd be cool if you can take that thing and suck her off and shock it.
It is cool. So I'll excuse it.
Right. Same here. We got to know more of sort of the supporting cast here. Layla, who is just a voice on the phone in the first episode. We really get to know her here. And her big reveal for Steven is that she and Mark are husband and wife, that they are actually married. I guess I hope we get a better understanding of what Mark's life was. And he says to Steven something about, I used to always be able to keep this under control, or the walls between us better. She has no knowledge that Steven was a thing, that he literally has this other personality, but she does know he was Moon Knight. So I guess I'm not, right now I'm confused. It's okay. It's early. We can be confused, but I hope we get better understanding of did Steven exist and he was already becoming Steven, or was he suppressing Steven all this time? So I guess a two-part question for you is, what do you think as we got to know Layla here more? And what are your thoughts on the dynamic of their marriage and the Steven of it all prior to this?
I like that Layla is becoming thing in this series, and looks like she's becoming quite integral, and she's strong. I wonder if there's more to her as well. There's this, it struck me as interesting that when Stephen was in trouble with Harrow, when Harrow kind of gets his claws into him, she just seems to turn up and help him out. And we know that they had, she mentions that she and Mark had a life of adventure, and they had missions together in this episode. So that's all very interesting. But also I was intrigued by, this series is using mirrors to denote fractured identities, another reality. And we see her at one point when she's on her motorbike, kind of solely in her wing mirror. And I thought, is there more to learn about her? Is there another side to her? And I know that some people have been speculating whether she could be the mutant Layla Miller, or based on her from the comics. So I'm hoping that that's a thing.
Yeah, it's clearly she can handle herself. It's like, feels like, that there were adventures that she and Mark had together in the past. We do find out that, though, they were going to get a divorce, so that things were on the rocks. It's interesting because Mark tells Stephen, like, when I've repaid my debt, you'll never see or hear from me again. And it's almost like it's not quite clear. Is he saying, like, I'll put the barrier between us, or I'll go away? Like, it's like not quite clear with that. It is interesting, and we'll talk in a second about Harrow and Harrow of it all, but we get this little quick mention of Khonshu wanting Layla as a replacement, as like he eyes her as the next Moon Knight. Yes. So there's something about her, it feels like
something about her,
something about Layla.
there was a reason that he picked Mark, and I think it's Harrow that suggests it might be because he's got this dissociative identity disorder that made him a good candidate. So so Khonshu is looking for people that fit his ideal avatar.
So let's talk. That's a good transition into Harrow, because he had that quick mention in the first episode where he talked about how the voice in your head driving you crazy about Khonshu, that he knew more than he should. But here we just find out flat out, like, he was the former Avatar. He was the Moon Knight before this. So, first of all, you've got that history as far as like that this was the previous incarnation. You have to wonder about the adventures of Ethan Hawke in the Moon Knight suit. Did he have a Mr. Knight suit? I don't know. And also we get a little more about what Harrow wants. It's certainly and Amit, what he's trying to help Amit do. It's very Minority Report, as far as we're going to find people who could do terrible things. It's also very Winter Soldier, actually, with was it Project Insight, with the idea of like people who might do terrible things. We're just going to take them out first. So not a new idea in the MCU, but always, I think, a good, compelling one. What do you think of both? Harrow has, like, they do like in Marvel the villain who thinks they're doing the good thing. So what do you think about his motivations, and also about his history as a Moon Knight?
Yeah, I think that's good, because I think in general villains don't think they're a bad guy. I think, I don't know. Now I'm thinking about murderers, serial killers.
Well, but that's different. That's different, right?
That's different. Yeah, sorry, my mind went off. What was the question again, Eric? Sorry.
Just what do you think of his motivations, and also about his history as a Moon Knight?
Yeah, well, I said last week that, and I don't want to sound like I'm an awful person, but he has a point, doesn't he? Because he said last week, he said about had he and Amit been operating previously, then Hitler wouldn't have happened, and some of these awful atrocities that we've witnessed in the world. So he has a point, but of course it's very wrong to kill someone for something they haven't done. Now, I am very intrigued by what kind of Moon Knight he was, and why they went their separate ways ultimately, and how that happened. That's, Khonshu and Harrow. He says at one point, you don't have to do everything he tells you to do, about Khonshu, which I thought was really interesting, and how he learned that.
Yeah, definitely. That dynamic seems pretty interesting. A lot of conflict there. Of course, the we could have stopped Hitler thing it goes to the whole "would you kill baby Hitler" debate, which comes up here in a very funny way. Again, they are very good at mixing in the humor with these big moments of when he just turns to everyone. He's like, "You're all into that, killing children." See, I can again do a bad British accent. As he says that.
I love it, Eric. No need
Thank you.
to kill.
I should have gone bigger with it. I held back. Why I should go full Steven with
Yeah.
it.
If you know the future, rehabilitate, don't kill. Come on, there's other ways, right?
Right. But I think that Harrow works as a zealot, has
Yes.
because he is certainly he feels so righteous with what he's doing, and really is sort of trying to convince Steven and even Mark. Remember when he's like, I'd like to talk to Mark now.
Yeah, and that whole setup he's got, it looks like a nice commune. Everyone's cool, relaxed, happy. They're watching videos of dolphins and flamingos.
Guys making growing great tomatoes,
Yeah, that soup that he ate. Lentil soup, wasn't it? Yeah, that was delicious.
Right. See, yeah, it's there. Harrow's got it going on there. Was that a real neighborhood they mentioned that he's turned into his little we revitalized? Did that sound familiar to you?
I'm not sure. What did he say?
I don't know if they might not name it. They might just say like, this used to be a terrible crime-ridden neighborhood. So, that part of London.
I know. Yeah, I didn't recognize it, but
I am curious, what do you think? This came up a lot. I saw a lot of discussion online about this, saw articles about this. What are we to take, because this is in the MCU, even if they're not being huge with the connections, about the Egyptian gods so far are just being presented as gods. And that is an interesting contrast, because the Norse gods, Thor, they were very careful to be like, these are aliens, they came to Earth and they influenced, that's why people worship the Norse gods, because they saw these aliens. And then you've got the Eternals and the Celestials who might be worshipped in different ways, but again, we know they're from outer space. So far, we're just being told these are the Egyptian gods. Is this a strange curveball, or is it just sort of like, hey, MCU's been around long enough, we can introduce this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't question it personally. I just accept that they are, there's some insane stuff has happened in the MCU. There's a multiverse, so I'm happy to believe in gods. But having said that, this series is really playing with this mental health thing, and both of these episodes have really gone out of their way to pose the question: is this actually in his head, or is it real? Everything in his kind of life as Stephen, there's stuff dressing the set everywhere that would infiltrate his fantasies or his dreams. So who knows? But my instinct is to say that the gods are real in the MCU. Do you agree?
No, I agree, and I guess I'm fine with that too, because it's now been it's been around so long that I think we can accept that. Look, early on, I think they were so afraid of people not being able to connect to it, and even though they were being way more comics oriented than other adaptations, they still wanted to have Thor be like, hey, science, what you call magic is science to us. But then by Doctor Strange, they're like, and there's magic,
Yeah.
So I think it could be the same with the gods. It's like, well, the Norse gods weren't really gods; they were aliens, and Earthlings thought they were gods. But the Egyptians' gods, they're just gods. I think that's fine. And you can, if you want, you can always say they're aliens who got here earlier. It can be whatever you want. I do think about the fact that we know that Christian Bale is playing Gore the God Butcher in Thor: Love and Thunder. So I'm like, is there any Egyptian gods he might want to butcher? I don't know.
I can think of one if she Amit, if she makes herself known in this series in some form, I'm sure she will.
Yeah, it feels like that's where we're going. We got more of Khonshu, by the way, here. And we got little glimpses in the first episode. Here we saw him full on, looking just like the comics. Really cool seeing that art, Mr. Knight and Khonshu. It's like straight from the comics. It looks really cool on screen. And F. Mary Abraham, I love him playing this voice of this often frustrated, pissed off god, you know?
Yeah, he's great. He's great. What a inspired piece of casting, I think.
I think so too. That's it's one of those things where I think a few years ago it would have sounded so weird that F. Abraham's going to play a important role in the Marvel universe, but now, why not?
Perfect.
Let me jump in here with a couple of questions we've got from the chat. This one for Kim. I'm not so bothered by this from Raynard City Update channel. I'm not so bothered by Stephen's accent. More that there seems to be one unified London accent. What about you? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm not bothered by it at all. I am totally embracing it. It doesn't sound like anyone I know, but I know what he's trying to do. Someone said that it sounded like a good Essex accent, which I would beg to differ with. But I just, all these phrases that are in, I don't know where they've got them from, but people do say them. It just sounds really weird hearing Oscar Isaac trying to do this accent saying MI6 bonkers, bruv.
I have to ask you a question. There's a moment in this episode where Stephen says, this Mark seems like a right twit. I'm used to hearing that word with a different letter in it. And I was like, this seems like this is a Disney Plus,
Yeah. It is a word. It is a word that we use. It's a very polite way of saying someone's an idiot.
Right.
But it's not, it's quite anachronistic. People don't really use it nowadays.
I want, maybe we'll see like that, what was there like a TV show or something that he saw that influenced what he's doing here,
Yeah.
We don't know because I really love, like you said, he throws in these phrases, he throws in just a lot of these random sayings, and they're great. Timothy Reynolds asks, this is a chicken and the egg question here. Which came first, Stephen or Mark? I will say, I think we can go into comic books here because they're not being one-to-one. Like in the comic books, he was born Mark Spector, and that's, I guess, like his birth name and identity. I don't, it seems like that's what we're supposed to take away here, but I don't think it's 100% cemented. What do you think here?
Yeah, it is not 100%. And starting the series with us identifying with Stephen obviously makes us initially think that this is the guy we're following. This is the guy that whose body it is. This is the guy who came first. But, the clues so far lead me to believe that they're going with Mark having been the original personality inside this body. I wonder if there are more personalities to come. I know that the comic book version, I think I said this last week, the comic book version has more personalities, right? So
yeah, there's Jake Lockley has been conspicuous by his absence because he was the third of there was Mark, Stephen, and Jake. So we'll see if if Jake shows up. Although this leads to another question Raynard City Update channel has about what are your thoughts on how this has adapted the story? I don't really know the comics, so I'm personally just enjoying it. I can say I don't know how familiar you are with the comics before, Kim, and I haven't read all of Moon Knight comics, but I've read a fair share. But one thing I'll say about Moon Knight is that they kind of retconned him a lot, through even the idea that his different personalities were literal manifestation. Originally, they were just different. He had secret identities, and then eventually they decided no, they're literally personalities, and they've kind of changed a lot through the years. Was it Khonshu who caused this? Was it just a mental condition he was born with? Has been both retconned and left ambiguous. So all of which to say is I'm okay with this show being a little bit of a mashup. Mr. Knight in the comics is much more of a literal other identity versus what Stephen thinks of when he becomes Moon Knight. But I think it works fine here. It works well for the show, And
is I'm not very familiar with the comics, but is Mr. Knight kind of, you say, is a different identity. He's more uses his brains in these situations.
He's more like a public facing, a Moon Knight who can be more talking to people and interacting with people as far as what he is.
Which is not our Stephen, is it really?
No. But Stephen from the ground up is different. I mean, because Stephen in the comics is Bruce Wayne, basically. He's this just a rich playboy who has a secret life. But I like this Steven, you know.
Yeah, no, and I as I say, I'm not familiar with the comics, although I did read the Werewolf by Night comic that was free in today's episode. If you click the QR code today.
Yep. If people don't know what Kim is referring to, both episodes so far have had moments where there are QR codes on screen that, if you click them, bring them to free comic books from Moon Knight's history. I think that's a really fun idea to give people a way to get there. Where was the QR code in this episode?
It was on the door of the storage locker. Okay. So just as he goes inside, it's I think number 43, and the QR code is beneath it.
There you go. So yeah, so far they've done that with both episodes. They got to do all 6 now, right? That's only 6 episodes, so I think we'll get there. Brent Draher says, favorite part might have been Steven hugging the statue and it being a real guy / street performer. I think we mentioned this last week. I did not in the first episode. I thought it was a statue. What about you? Was this a oh my gosh, that's a real guy moment?
No, I mean, I can't remember, because as we said last week, we both of us have seen 4 episodes, so I can't remember at what point I realized
right
he was a real guy. But those living statues are a thing in London.
You have them a little bit here too.
Okay.
And it's a another Easter egg is that character Crawley in the comic books, that's like an informant for Moon Knight, but now he's a living statue. But
I love what they've done with it though. So again, it's like this attention to detail. He's a gold statue, which directly corresponds with kind of Egyptian opulence, Egyptian relics, that he's got in the museum and in his fantasy world. It's manifested in his dream world, if you like, too. So I thought that's cool.
I agree. I liked it a lot. Like, first I did on the first episode. I did think it it was a statue. So shout out to the guy for keeping so still. And then I thought it was cool that it was Crawley again. This is one of those things where what will make people angry from changes to the comics versus like, oh, that's a fun, different way, is always going to be different for the person. But for me, I like these sort of different ways. Like you mentioned, like they've snuck in like a Frenchie's name last week, and now we have Crawley here in a very different version. He's not an informant, but he's like a sounding board for him. So it's still a little bit of the same thing, a guy he can go and talk to. So I thought that that all worked really well. Any other like things you want to talk about on this episode, Kim, before we start to say our goodbyes? Any highlights or standout moments?
I mean, for me, there was one scene that was a boring scene by all accounts, but I loved it. I loved the way it was directed, and it was when he was getting fired in his boss's office, Steven. And I talked about last week and a bit this week about mirroring and reflections and plurality, of identity and things like that, and this idea that there's another world. Well, in this sequence, you've got, as you look here, the reverse shot is looking at Steven. Behind him, not only is the desk reflective, so you've got that whole mirroring thing, but behind him you've got this the 2 lamps duplicated, the 2 items of furniture duplicated, there's 2 pictures on the wall. And I just thought that those details were so lovely. And then opposite, behind the guy, I mean, he's got curtains behind him, which is very unusual for an office at work. But those curtains they're not the same curtains. But at the end, when we see him, Mark, wake up in the room in Egypt, there's curtains kind of a similar kind of width that he opens. And I liked that attention to detail again. Very cool.
Yeah, I agree with you, because obviously the mirroring, the duality, Mark and Steven speaking to each other is such an important part of the show, and I think you're absolutely right that they're having fun pulling that through all these different scenes. I like that this episode ends with sort of Mark as the guiding force for the first time, and now Steven being the one that's sort of trapped, as we learn, and he's kind of now experiencing that for his first time. And then I'll say I keep loving the running gag of what does he say? Harrow says, "I hear you loud and clear, Stephen Grant of the gift shop." It's just really all about the gift shop. I rolled my eyes a bit. It felt like another part that one moment that felt like a joke that you would have made 15 years ago that I think we've kind of moved past was when Stephen kind of is told the whole deal of Moon Knight, and he's like, "Khonshu, Egyptian god of the moon. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." I'm like, I get like they're trying to sell it, like be like, we know this is ridiculous, but go with it. But I feel like we're so far into the MCU. I don't know if we need that anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
But I also loved when Stephen says, I don't care how bloody handsome you are, which is it's a double joke because on one hand, it's like, is he complimenting himself or is he just being like, you carry yourself in such a way that you are more handsome than I am, you know?
Yeah, and of course, Oscar Isaac is well known for being very handsome. And there's a pause at that moment, and it's almost like Oscar Isaac acknowledging what he's just said, which I thought was cool.
Yeah. I agree. Oh, I'll throw in here Brent Dreher. We did mention this last week. It's still a question though. Who do we think Stephen was talked to when he called his mom in episode 1? Mentioning that in this episode, Layla is like, but you're talking to your mom again. So we know that Mark and his mom have an estranged relationship, but we still are like, I don't think we have any more answers on this, but it is a curiosity that he seemed to really think he was talking to someone last week.
Yeah, and he mentions in this episode that the apartment he's living in is his mum's as well. So that added another kind of element of curiosity to this conundrum.
Yeah, I hope we do get sort of some concrete answers on when Stephen took control fully and how he got set up in this life, since it feels like there's some interesting questions, and if you're Layla, some frustrating questions there. That is about does it for our review here, but we leave you, we have a little more. We have an Ethan Hawke interview that I did that actually follows up on a lot of this episode, because we sort of talked a lot directly about the fact that now we know that he was a former Moon Knight, Harrow, and Ethan Hawke's thoughts on that, and pondering a prequel where we might see that story, and Harrow's sort of pull as a cult leader. So it's him and Muhammad Diab, the director of the first, third, fifth, and sixth episode, speaks on that too. So you can check that out right now. And we'll be back next week talking about more Moon Knight. Thanks, guys.
It must be very difficult. The voice in your head. There's chaos in you.
To be perceived as a cult leader means you have to have something to initially sort of sell the followers on. What do you think it is about Harrow that gets people listening to him and believing in him?
I don't know. It's always mysterious, isn't it? Why certain people can connect with others and inspire these great idealistic dreams in them. And I don't know what it is about him. I mean, I would have to say his conviction. Conviction is very compelling to people when you feel certain of your ideas. I think all of us are so confused most of the time that if you meet somebody who's sure about what reality is and what you should do next, it feels good. Maybe that's all you need.
Creating a villain is something very interesting. And the moment I approached Ethan with this project, I told him, don't read the script. Mm-hmm. I know you're a great writer and I have great ideas for this character. Let's create it. And I pitched him how I see him. It was me and Sarah at the time. Sarah's my wife and she's a producer on the show. And I told him how we see it. And I really think what he's proposing is actually very interesting. The idea of a villain that could actually cleanse the world from bad people. The problem is some of those bad people haven't done the bad thing that they're expected, just like Minority Report in a way. And like the very first scene that actually Ethan came up with when he crushes that glass, and it shows that he's not a false prophet. He's someone who really believes in what he's doing and he's very committed and there's no tricks there. What you see is what you get. He really believes in this. He really thinks he's a good guy.
I remember reading these stories about deeply spiritual people who often would get into some self-lacerating exercises if they were so mad at the sin in themselves that they weren't pure. This desire to overcome. Most of us are either drawn by a fear of pain or a pursuit of pleasure. That's kind of what motivates most of our action. And if you're trying to liberate yourself from that wheel, one of the things that people would do is, wear a hair shirt, lash themselves, wrap themselves in barbed wire. I mean, spiritual people have done some crazy stuff in the name of cleansing the soul, so to speak. So I just had this vision of him listening to Bob Dylan and putting glass in his shoes. And I told the guys about it, and they're like, let's shoot that.
It must be very difficult. The voices in your head.
We learned pretty early on that Harrow was once Khonshu's avatar, you know, a Moon Knight himself, it seems. Did you ponder what his life was like during that period, and how effective was he when that costume was on him?
I do. I thought about it a lot. I kept wondering, well, what was the prequel to this? What was I like as the Moon Knight, you know, as the Fist of Vengeance? I bet it would be a pretty tough life.
Did you, do you have some imagined adventures he went on? Some arguments with Khonshu?
I did, but so I kind of imagined him as kind of like a, you know, a person in recovery, a person who found this new philosophy, like, you know, like as if he's recovering from some PTSD and then found God, you know? So he became an ultimate zealot against Khonshu.
Your identities are not something to be feared and despised, but something to be welcomed.
I saw the Black Phone at Beyond Fest, which is excellent, by the way.
Oh, great.
You know, you hadn't really played villains prior to this year. This year, you're going big on it. I don't know if enjoy the right word, but it's sort of interesting for you to get to explore. These are two very different characters, but this facet.
You know, in a lot of ways, Black Phone is the first real villain I've ever played. You can call Harrow the villain, but in Marvel movies, in general, they're so interested in showing the nuances of villains. And, you know, I mean, in a way, Harrow's a villain, but he's really just a villain to Moon Knight. I mean, he's the former Moon Knight himself. He's really the antagonist is really the right word for who he is. He wants to heal the world. In Black Phone, I am a murderer, creep, horrible person, you know? So Black Phone is different.
Embrace the chaos.